John 15:1-17. I am the true grapevine, and my Father is the gardener. He cuts off every branch of mine that doesn't produce fruit, and he prunes the branches that do bear fruit, so they will produce even more. You have already been pruned and purified by the message I have given you. Remain in me, and I will remain in you, for a branch cannot produce fruit if it is severed from the vine, and you cannot be fruitful unless you remain in me. Yes, I am the vine, you are the branches. Those who remain in me and I in them will produce much fruit, for apart from me you can do nothing. Anyone who does not remain in me is thrown away like a useless branch and withers. Such branches are gathered into a pile to be burned. But if you remain in me and my words remain in you, you may ask for anything you want and it will be granted. When you produce much fruit, you are my true disciples. This brings great glory to my Father. I have loved you even as the Father has loved me. Remain in my love. When you obey my commandments, you remain in my love, just as I obey my Father's commandments and remain in his love. I have told you these things so that you will be filled with joy. Yes, your joy will overflow. This is my commandment: love each other in the same way I have loved you. There is no greater love than to lay down one's life for one's friends. You are my friends if you do what I command. I no longer call you slaves, because a master doesn't confide in his slaves. Now you are my friends, since I have told you everything the Father told me. You didn't choose me, I chose you. I appointed you to go and produce lasting fruit, so that the Father will give you whatever you ask for using my name. This is my command: love each other. For the stories of Jesus that connect us to God's love and grace, thanks be to God. On Wednesday night, our church space was filled with tables and guests. 55 people sat down to a meal where strangers became neighbours. You may have heard or read in the church news that we would be having an iftar dinner, but some may have wondered what an iftar dinner is like. And I'm hoping that some who volunteered could share a few impressions. During the Lenten period, in the lead up to Easter, Christians prepare for the story of the Passion and the celebration of Easter. Historically, some have fasted or gone without. Shrove Tuesday, or Mardi Gras, meaning Fat Tuesday, was the last celebration before Ash Wednesday. It was a day to consume the flour, eggs and milk before going without those things for the Lenten period of fasting. The last of the butter might be consumed, and the pancakes made on Shrove Tuesday or Pancake Day were the last treat until Easter. Hence, it was also known as Fat Tuesday. According to James Browning in the journal God Faith Media, Western writers sometimes refer to Ramadan as the Muslim Lent. There are some superficial similarities, some significant differences, and deep resemblances between Ramadan and Lent. Fasting is the hallmark of Ramadan. The Quran says Muslims should fast during the month of Ramadan because that is when the Quran was revealed. Fasting is obligatory for every Muslim with certain exceptions. The Quran and Muslim law offer specific instruction on how and when the fast is to be practiced. For example, eat and drink until you can tell a white thread from a black one in the light of the coming dawn. Then resume the fast until nightfall. Many Christians fast during Lent, although fasting is not a universal Christian practice. The Bible gives no specific instructions on a season that Christians are required to fast, but Jesus fasted 40 days in the wilderness, Matthew 4:2, and Jesus' disciples are criticised for not fasting in Mark 2, verses 18-20. All Muslims throughout the world observe Ramadan, regardless of their sect. school, or nationality. Christian observance of Lent varies greatly among Catholics, Orthodox and Protestants, and some Christians do not observe Lent at all. Ramadan focuses on self-discipline, devotion to God and generosity towards the needy. During Ramadan, Muslims cultivate complete obedience to God, a sensitivity to God's sustenance and empathy for those who are poor and hungry. Lent focuses on penitence and preparation for Easter. The climax of Lent is Holy Week, which commemorates the last week of Jesus' life, including the Last Supper and the crucifixion. The model of Jesus as suffering servant is held up for Christians to follow. During the period of Lent, Palm Sunday becomes a time when many Christians focus on the ongoing need for justice in the world. Both Ramadan and Lent end in a joyous festival. Ramadan concludes with the festival of fast breaking, Eid ul-Fitr. Muslims offer special prayers to God and alms to the poor. 3 days of festivities follow. Lent ends with Easter, the festival of the resurrection, which celebrates new life in Christ. Sincere faith is crucial for both Ramadan and Lent. The intentions of the Muslim determines the validity of the Ramadan fast. Jesus teaches that true fasting is of the heart, not merely an outward action. Matthew 6:16-18. Pope John Paul II wrote about Lent, "The main current of Lent must flow through the interior person, through hearts and consciences." More worship, participation and personal acts of piety mark both Ramadan and Lent. Despite their similarity, Ramadan and Lent operate in very different theological frameworks, but there's still deep resemblance between them. Both Muslims and Christians connect increased devotion to God with religious acts of purity and self-sacrificial service. Fasting is placed on a larger context of God's gracious provision. For both, true worship is a matter of faithful and joyful commitment to God, not merely conformity to religious rules. For a few years now, I've been a member of a scriptural reasoning gathering of Quranic and biblical scholars. Now, I'm neither an academic scholar of the Quran nor the Bible, but my focus on intercultural studies and the mission of God give me some anthropological skills to assist the group. Together, we have studied Abraham, Ibrahim, Adam, or Adam, Adamah, and mercy as a characteristic of God or a name for God. We have carefully and cautiously worked together, building respect and friendship over time. The Judeo-Christian story and the Muslim story originate in a shared heritage. Father Abraham had many sons. Yet we often find ourselves thinking about us and them. It is easy to identify our differences, harder sometimes to name our similarities. Since coming to Eastwood, I have found a bit of the othering in myself. I classify and stereotype and refer to people as the Aussies, the Chinese, and the Koreans. I find myself doing that. Note, I'm not criticising you for doing that. Rather, I'm saying I don't know how to avoid doing that myself. We have not all had the same experiences. We do not all speak the same languages. We are not all first-generation migrants. We are not all of the same history in this place. We only know a limited amount of each other's stories. It did not even occur to me that people were not used to hosting special meal events in the church space. I assumed that as the place of welcome around God's table, that the church space would be the natural place to hold feasts and welcome events, as an extension of the Eucharistic invitation of Jesus Christ to welcome all people to the Lord's table. Just as we noticed last week that there was no obstacle to a black, foreigner, ungendered money man being baptised, the Ethiopian eunuch, we note this week that this is the Lord's table, not the church's table. Jesus himself teaches about going out and fetching those who might not normally be invited to a banquet to come and fill the places. The gospel emphasises invitation, inclusion, and hospitality. When the church seeks to exclude, it ceases to be a sign of heaven's grace and blessing. In the Uniting Church, we sometimes talk about communion as being the meal for the nourishment of the baptised, which it is, but at the same time we practice an open table, which means that we do not refuse anyone. We welcome children. We welcome people who do not yet understand the blessing they are receiving. After all, do any of us fully comprehend the blessing that Jesus offers us in this holy meal? I keep coming back to the table only to realise that there is more grace, more love, more invitation, more mystery. However many times we may feel insufficient or wounded or stupid, God welcomes us back with even greater enthusiasm, not because of what we have been, but because of the hope and promise of what we are yet to become. If you plant a vineyard anywhere in the world, there will be a risk of pests and diseases. And one of the most prominent diseases for grapevines is phylloxera. It's a bug that attacks the roots of the vine. Once the roots are infected, they will be dead within 6 years. There is no cure. So how then can people grow grapes? Grafting. You can graft a new vine onto an old, strong, established vine that will be resistant to phylloxera. The technique of grafting has been around since ancient times and is in use today. When Jesus tells the story of being the vine and invites us to be the branches, we are invited to draw from God's strength and power and rightness. Yes, we may be weak, but we are invited to rely on God's wholeness. Do any of you have a citrus tree with multiple fruits grafted onto the one trunk? Church can be like that. We are not all the same, but we are grafted onto the one source of life. We are grafted to the one God. We are bound by shared life essence. We are called to be fruitful, to share the fruit and blessings of our lives with others. We are blessed with resources, and when we have them, even if it's a bag of limes or a beautiful building, our Christian obligation is to share what we have with others, both in giving and receiving. Sharing a meal with Muslims in this sacred space was a sign of God's grace and peace. Our guests were grateful and deeply respectful. They experienced gospel. Like in the story of the Ethiopian eunuch, the question sat with us: is there any obstacle to us experiencing the grace of God in this place together? In this case, it was, is there a reason to exclude us from sitting in the presence of the Lord's table? Or for us today, is there anything that can stop God from wanting to pour out love on each of us in this way? No. Jesus says, I have loved you even as the Father has loved me. Remain in my love. When you obey my commands, you remain in my love, just as I obey my Father's commandments and remain in his love. I have told you these things so that you will be filled with my joy. Yes, your joy will overflow. On Easter Sunday, we worshipped in multiple languages. Together, we become the people God loves around God's table. The act of gathering becomes a sign of God's love as it will be fully revealed in heaven. But It's hard work and we're not there yet. What prevents us from gathering together in church or in homes? Are we too tired to learn how to receive and offer hospitality? Jesus says, "This is my commandment, love each other in the same way I have loved you." Jesus loved people both by giving his life for them, but also by eating with them. Perhaps an invitation that we might offer or that we might accept to dine with one another, to eat in each other's homes, or to gather in coffee shops or clubs might be a good place for us to start.